Thank you everyone for joining me today, and a big thank you to the organizers of Drupal GovCon. It's been such an awesome experience of this conference so far, and I'm excited about the upcoming sessions. So I'm excited to be here today to talk with you about incident management, specifically how your team can respond to change in ways that are overall effective and efficient. My name is Megan Kraft, and I'm a program manager and team lead with Palantir.net. Palantir designs and develops solutions for public sector, healthcare, higher ed, and technology clients using both Drupal and other open source technologies. I'm currently based in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and at Palantir, I'm largely responsible for managing projects and portfolios that span several industries, the most notably government initiatives, local to state to federal. And I also help to develop our project management best practices, which is how I arrived at the incident management practice that I'll be sharing with you today. I do want to note if you want to ask any questions along the way, I'm happy to answer them. Just pop your question into chat and I'll do my best to address it. There'll also be time at the end of the session if you have any questions. So here's a brief overview of what I'm hoping to cover with you today. So we'll start the session by looking at the foundational concepts. We'll talk about who the session is for and who's involved in incident management, what is incident management, and then even beyond that, why it is so important to talk about with your teams and within your organization. We'll then transition into the application or the practice of incident management, and we'll look at how high performing teams manage incidents, and you'll leave with a set of tools and best practices that you can implement within your team or within your company or organization today. We'll then conclude with talking through how teams and individuals can learn and grow through reflection after an incident takes place and is resolved. So let's dive into some of the foundational concepts. To start, this session in incident management as a practice is for you if you're a member of a team who provides client or customer or constituent support or services. If you manage a team who provides constituent client or customer services or support, if you're an Agile practitioner, project or program manager, or you're a member or a lead of a development or operations team. So really, the session is for everyone. So what is an incident? Well, when we talk about an incident, we're referring to an event that causes severe disruption to or a reduction in the quality of a service that we provide. And it often requires a timely or a time sensitive response. Here's the example we probably all think of when we think about incident management. A site crashes. Um, about a year and a half ago, I was the team lead for a healthcare client who has several of their hospital sites come down suddenly one day. Um, this was an example of both a client and a customer facing incident. So it had a really high impact, particularly given that we were in the midst of the pandemic. And the sites that came down were the conduits through which the healthcare team shared out really important and time sensitive COVID related information. So we knew we had to respond quickly. And that was actually the team through which we developed the incident management practice. Another example of an incident is when a particular piece of functionality on a site stops working. So you have your whole site live, but a critical piece of functionality related to your business or providing services has stopped working. One example of this, say for healthcare, is if your find a doctor piece of functionality is not working, but the rest of the site is up. So while this may not feel or be perceived as grave as an entire site coming down, you still want to treat it as an incident, particularly if that piece of functionality is really high impact or crucial to your business. And then a third example, one that I certainly didn't think of as I was writing the practice, but I found you can easily and effectively apply incident management to, um, is if a client comes to you requesting, say, several iterations of design beyond what you originally scoped, you can treat that as an incident. That request, that client or customer request, has the potential to blow or jeopardize your timeline, your scope, and your budget, and it will put the entire project at risk. So you can effectively apply an incident management practice, even in a scenario like this. We talk about incident management for several reasons. To start, incidents are expensive, they're costly. And when you don't engage in best practices, what ends up happening is that the cost of that incident is driven up and it can really impact your overall project budget. It's also a cost that is experienced by either your client, your customer, or your constituent who is receiving the services being provided. Um, Incidents also have the potential to jeopardize your reputation and your customer retention. Both reputation and retention really hinge on open and honest communication and trust. Both of those, communication and trust, are really foundational for an incident management practice. And then finally, probably one some of us have encountered before, is that incidents that are not handled well are wildly disruptive to a team. They have the potential to steer all attention away from the work that needs to be done and towards the incident in a way that is perhaps not overall productive and is expensive for your organization or clients. So, acknowledging what is at risk with poor incident management practices, here are some of the benefits of having a great incident management play that you can draw on if the time comes. First, you'll see that overall there's an increase in collaboration between teammates on your team and your client. Incident management, when handled well, encourages participation of all teammates across your team to solve a really tricky problem. You'll likely also start to notice that there's more direct communication and between your teammates and with your client. Clear, concise, and empathetic, though most importantly relevant, messages and communication helps to build the client trust and loyalty because they're getting more informed um, of progress that you've made towards resolving the incident or blockers that you've encountered. Um, and internally, that same type of direct and concise communication really helps to provide a shared understanding of who is doing what and when. An incident management play also will build trust within your team. Your team will begin to trust that colleagues will perform their duties during a response to incidents, and teammates will jump in and perhaps embrace a break in process if the unexpected takes place. And then finally, perhaps the greatest benefit that I've experienced in applying an incident management play and what comes forward during the reflection portion of the play is that having a solid practice around how you will handle incidents before they take place encourages and supports honesty and openness within the team. Teammates are encouraged to raise their hand or wave the flag as soon as they see something that has gone awry, or even if they think something has gone awry and they're looking for validation from a teammate. Um, that is perhaps one of the greatest benefits that I've experienced from prepping a team before an incident takes place on how we will handle it. It really prompts teammates to be involved in identifying incidents before they happen. So now that we've covered a few of the core concepts, let's take a look at what the practice of incident management looks like. The second portion of this presentation will be framed as really a timeline of events. So we'll navigate through the incident management process from start to finish together. We'll walk through the moments when you discover an incident, and then we'll talk through the process by which you can act and adopt principles of effective communication to get to the point where you're able to resolve the incident and feel confident that you can move forward. And then that last piece is reflection. I feel is the most important, though most often forgotten piece of incident management. We'll walk through together how you and your teams can reflect in a meaningful way on the incident, really to ensure you don't make the same mistake twice, and you can implement some lessons learned and make improvements as a team. So let's dive into the discovery portion of an incident. There are several ways that you and your team may detect an incident. Never the optimal, though it happens. A customer or a client or a constituent may sound the alarm. You may find that you received a handful of emails from a client saying that their websites are down or a piece of functionality is not working properly, and you need to rally the team quickly. You may also see that your customer or your client has filed a support ticket or casually mentioned that a piece of functionality is down while you're on a call with them. While they may not realize the impact or the severity of what it is that they're describing or seeing, it's really up to you and your team as the experts to determine the impact and then determine really if you need to put the incident management practice into play and resolve what the client identified. Third, the one we're probably all most familiar with, the monitoring of systems. This is perhaps the easiest and most timely way of recognizing an incident. You're likely familiar with it. You get an automated email from your provider that your website is down or that something is working really, really slowly or is under heavy load. And you get your team together to respond. Um, that's likely a really frequent way. If you have those checks and balances in place, then you'll start to learn about an incident. Internal to your team, there are likely two ways that you're going to notice an incident. Um, Hopefully, a teammate will make an observation and flag a concern or an incident over Slack or an email. Now, they rarely, if ever, will say, "We have an incident," but it's up to you as the leader of your team to know that you need to put the incident management practice into play. This is perhaps this is one of the ways I think I've seen more frequently when there is psychological safety in place on a team. That psychologically safe environment really is critical because teammates then are empowered and encouraged to bring forward issues, to bring forward concerns to the team, rather than working in a silo or trying to figure it out by themselves if they see that something is not working properly. And then the last way that I've really come to detect an incident has taken place is learning of it through Scrum. So a teammate may mention that they're experiencing some challenges or some blockers or impediments to their work. And the more questions that you can ask to understand what those challenges or blockers are, you may uncover that there's an incident taking place and that your teammate needs some assistance. So we're at the point where you recognize that there's an issue. Either a client has reached out or a teammate has identified an issue and messages you over Slack, email, or Teams. Um, what you do next is what can make or break a high performing team. So I mentioned earlier, the keystone of incident management is open, honest, and frequent communication. So you're going to need to have some tools in place prior to any incident taking place um, to set yourself up well to handle those. I would note that in order to create that safe space where this type of open and honest and frequent communication can take place, there does have to be a shared understanding across the company, the agency, across teams, that at some point, every project team will encounter an incident at one point or another. And then once you acknowledge that, that's really when you're in the place to start to identify what tools you're going to need for for in case an incident pops up. And when you're thinking about the tooling, um, the questions that you want to be asking and the mindset that you want to be in is really how will we as a team be in frequent and close communication, and how will we keep our client or our customer, our constituent first? Here are a few examples of the tools that I use at Palantir when there's an incident. So to begin, to ensure that we have an open environment that's collaborative and transparent, and where teammates can communicate across several planes, we use Slack as a messaging tool. Teams might be what your agency determines is best. But we use Slack and create project channels and then have a company-wide Slack channel. You'll likely need to use a different tool for client communication. The goal here is to ensure that your client has the most up-to-date information on what's happening related to the incident. My reasonable default for this is to use email to be in communication with the client. And I always reply on the same email thread so that it's all in one place for the client to refer to. You'll also need to have some sort of shared collaboration space where you can be providing live updates uh, and notifying your team of kind of what's going on. So I use a combination of Google Docs for creation and then Atlassian's Confluence for long-term storage. And then finally, You will definitely need some way to talk in real time with your teammates. And I would encourage either Google Meet or Zoom or some type of web conferencing tool if you are remote or hybrid. Um, if you're in person and it's safe to do so, perhaps you'd consider being in a room together or a space where you can quietly work through the issue and ask questions as you're trying to resolve the incident. So again, we're at the stage where a question or a disruption or a request has come in, and the person receiving this disruption has notified the full project team. Again, this is usually where we would use Slack, and either I would loop in Palantir leadership, depending on the scenario and depending on the client relationship. But you want everyone to know on your team that there's a disruption that's happened on the project. One thing I would recommend is before you even look to put this practice into play at your organization, I would recommend sharing it out with your company or agency leadership. Um, that way, you can get clarity around who would want or need to be notified if there was an incident on a project. Now, the moment you learn of an incident, get everyone you need on a video call if you're remote, or in the same room if you're in person, and get them to start talking, organizing, and sharing screens as early as possible. I quickly try to move out of Slack into a Hangout or a Meet or a Zoom, so that you don't have to have that headache afterwards of going through Slack to review all the messages related to the incident. Next up, you're going to want to determine your incident team, and this would take place pretty quickly over the Hangout that or the video conference that you just hopped on. I always start by first assessing which area of the project is impacted. If we get in a major request that could blow our budget, I would want the project manager to be part of the incident team because it falls within their domain. If a site came crashing down and we had to get it up as quickly as we could, you're likely going to want either your architecture owner or your engineer on that call. Once you know which area of the project is impacted, from that group, you're going to want to decide who the decision maker is. Perhaps this is either a senior leader or a senior representative, perhaps it's a product owner, but the role of the decision maker really is to take ownership of making that ultimate call in how to determine a path forward, though they will be in consultation with teammates along the way. You'll then identify the incident manager. It doesn't need to be a project manager, though I've found most often a PM does fill the incident manager role. The incident manager is going to ensure that client communications are happening effectively, and really they're there to be the shepherd for the team as you go through the incident management process. And as I mentioned, this is often the role that I find myself in on a team as the project manager. After you know the decision maker and incident manager, you want to determine who should be consulted and who should be informed on the team. An example of who may be consulted would be a designer or an engineer. It could be company management or leadership. And those who are consulted help to make recommendations to the decision maker based on their area of expertise and their knowledge. Anyone who's not a decision maker and not the incident manager, it's not consulted, is informed. And what this means is that they're likely in the place where they're taking in information rather than providing it. They're receiving updates, but likely don't have any um, information to share back to the incident team handling it. Once you have these roles identified, it is really critical that you communicate out to the full project team who is filling these roles. There should be absolutely no question whether a teammate is involved in the incident team or not. It's very important that everyone knows what role they're playing when an incident takes place, especially because it's usually really a fast moving scenario that you find yourself in. Anyone who's not on the incident team, um, they're not brought into decision making, they're likely not brought into the discussion meetings, and they're set up to progress with meaningful work that will help to advance the project. Um, Even if it's a just in time fashion, which I usually think of if we think about a Jira board and assigning work out, like maybe you're assigning ticket by ticket versus a whole column of work that's assigned out to a teammate. This is to help to manage any dependencies, if there are some, between the work that teammates are doing and the incident. Now, to combat the potentially stressful nature of managing an incident, I always use a status page. I quickly stand this up, usually using a template, and I share it out quickly. I'll post it in Slack, email it to leadership, and add it to Confluence really fast, even if it's completely blank at the time that I share it. The goal of this document is really to get the message and updates out there while keeping the team focused on primarily solving the issue. My goal when I use a status page is to share it first and improve it later. What this means is that when I share on a status page, it's usually riddled with spelling mistakes, but I don't worry about it. The goal is to get the information out. You can always revisit that and improve it later. You do want to use clear and plain language as best as you can. Um, this makes it a lot easier for folks who are not on the call with you to follow what is happening. And I'd also encourage you to use screenshots. That's why screen sharing is particularly important. I find if sometimes if maybe I'm a step behind what our team is talking about because I'm updating the status sheet, I'll grab a screenshot so that I have that information contained in the status page while I kind of catch back up. And you do want to keep it updated as best you can with brief, honest, and frequent updates. Here's an example of a status page. One thing I want to note is that you're working from the bottom up. So the most up-to-date information lives at the top of the status page, and the oldest information is towards the bottom. The goal here is that if someone dives into the status page who's not on the call with you, where you're trying to resolve the incident, they can look at the very top and understand exactly where you are as a team in navigating and trying to resolve the incident. Next up, this is really where the ideation and troubleshooting comes into play. The decision maker is going to want to seek out various perspectives. They'll be talking and sharing their screen and troubleshooting with other teammates on the call who are members of the incident management team. And they're going to gather advice from anyone and everyone who is meaningfully impacted or those who hold subject matter expertise. Goal is that the decision maker will arrive at a sound path forward through talking and consulting with teammates. Once they've gathered all the information that they can, the decision maker is going to want to form a written proposal. It may be short, it could be longer, and then they're going to want to make a call on how to move forward. The pressure doesn't lie on the decision maker, um, though they are responsible for making that call at the end. They're consistently talking with other teammates so that the decision that's arrived at really is informed by the collective wisdom of the team, and there's consensus around the path forward. All right. So, congratulations. You have resolved your incident and you have your written proposal on how to move forward documented. Once you've arrived at the resolution, you'll want to add that into your status page. So, you can see here in the example of a status page, I documented the project team, the core deciders, who was handling client communications and who took notes, just in case you have questions, the date, and then I include a brief summary of the incident and the resolution. You can see here it's 2 sentences long for the resolution, but it captures the path forward. Your next step is to close communications and tie up all loose ends. Once an incident is resolved, the incident manager will share out the status page after you've corrected all your spelling errors and ask the team for validation. The question I usually ask is like, please, as a team, go through this and make sure I captured all this information correctly. I'll tag teammates anywhere that I need validation of the information that I caught. This is important because it becomes a source of truth for your timeline. The incident manager then writes up the incident report using plain language. The incident report will contain a summary, a timeline, which can be pulled from that status page, a root cause analysis, and recommendations. So, really, what you're trying to capture here is the 5 whys: who, what, where, when, and why the incident took place. You could probably actually structure a really effective report if you use those 5 questions as a guide. And then you'll want to share out that report with your clients, your project team, key stakeholders, and if you're comfortable, the whole company. It could be uncomfortable, I understand, to share out an incident report with your full company, but I find that it really helps to build a culture of honesty and truth within projects. That incident report um, is not reflective of one person making a mistake, and it can really help all of their teammates engage in continuous learning. So I find it to be a really powerful learning opportunity. If a client or a stakeholder needs any clarifications, I always offer to hop on a brief call with them. So here's an example of an incident report that was used to close communications with a client. And then once everything is kind of quiet down, I'll add the incident information and resources into our Confluence for long-term storage and reference. I'll add in any documentation that was used um, during the incident and then a small statement about what that report was and why it was important. And so at this point, the incident is fully closed out. The team and your client understand when, how, and why the incident happened. And now your team is ready to reflect. You want to round out your incident management practice by engaging the team in a blameless postmortem to decrease the chances that this incident may happen again. There are a few reasons why I would encourage you to engage your team in reflection. First, allowing a team the time they need to reflect on an incident encourages support, it encourages collaboration, and it fosters team communication and openness. It also increases the chances that a teammate will feel comfortable and confident coming forward if they recognize or spot an incident in the future. Reflection after an incident also supports the growth mindset, which is really what you're aiming to build within a team. What this means is that your team can learn from the disruption, they can learn from the change that you encountered, they can identify how to move forward, and they can improve together. And what this does is not only build your team really effectively, but it improves your overall agility to deliver value to your client, to your constituents. Now, the way you're going to do that is through a blameless postmortem. It somewhat mirrors a retrospective if you're running those on your Scrum team, but it's often longer. I found that I usually will run 2 1-hour sessions following an incident. During the blameless postmortem, we reflect on what happened. So I'll give a recap of the incident, reflect on why it happened, how we responded, and we'll start to identify what can be done to prevent incidents like this in the future. And then we'll also talk about any way that we may want to improve our future response if an incident happens again. I always, usually I'm in the facilitator position of the postmortem. I always begin by stating that we're all coming to this blameless postmortem with the assumption that all teammates acted from a place of good intent. You want to keep communication between teammates fact based, objective, and honest, and then document your findings in a shared space like Confluence. If your project team is open to it, you might consider sharing out your findings and your learnings from the postmortem with your team, your disciplines, so either other project managers or other engineers, or the whole company to help really foster um, that true culture of collaboration and openness. So coming up on time, I encourage you to try out the incident management play and see how it works at your company or your agency. If you encounter any challenges or you make some drastic improvements to this practice, I encourage you to share it back with the community, to reach out to me. I have my email here, craft@palantir.net. Um, so yeah, if you get stuck or you find a way to even elevate the practice, I encourage you to share it back. So are there any questions that I can help answer around incident management? Okay, so we have a question in chat. In incident management, how do you avoid requirements changing and drastically increasing scope? That's a really good question. I often find that when requirements change and when uh, scope drastically increases, that's when I know an incident is taking place. If what you're referring to is scope changing within an incident, I think being in communication with your team around was absolutely imperative to resolve the incident is the most important question that you can be asking. You can figure out like the nice to haves and everything else afterwards, but keeping your team laser focused on what absolutely has to happen to resolve the incident, I think is how you block out that drastic increase in scope, which can happen. Stacy, I see you've added a question. Can I share my templates? I'd be happy to share templates. There will likely be a blog post following this session where on palantir.net's website where I can provide access to some of the templates. So I encourage you to check out our blogs, but also reach out over email, and I'd be happy to share some of the templates that I walked us through today. So I'm glad I hope they're helpful. They've kind of been tried and true, and so I've switched them up over time, but I found that they're quite reliable. We have another question in chat. Any advice for when there is a separate incident response team outside your control, like a web developer team versus a totally separate IT security team, and they have very ideas for what updates or tempo they want from you as you try to respond? Very good question. I think perhaps, so I've not encountered this before. So I'm kind of brainstorming out loud, but I think what what I would do is, if you've encountered that before, certainly include a rep from that totally separate team that you're referring to in your blameless postmortem. You'll want to hear their feedback and their opinion around what was happening, so that you can tweak your process in the future. And then I almost wonder if it'd be feasible to include a member of that totally separate team within the incident management response team, or when an incident takes place, you're you're coming into alignment and agreement on how frequently you'll be sharing updates with them. If they're another team within your organization, you may consider sharing out that status page that I was referring to. See if I can get back. Yeah, so you may decide that you want to share out the status page, and then because this is getting live updated as you're kind of navigating the incident, and so they can get live updates just by referring to the status page, and they can see kind of where you are within the within resolving the incident. So I think those are probably, though I've not encountered this before, I think that's probably where I would start, seeing if you can incorporate them into your retrospectives to improve your process, perhaps considering having one of them on your incident response team, and then three, sharing out the incident status page so that they can be getting live updates as you're working through it. That's a really tough question because I can imagine a scenario where um, the team is trying to resolve the incident, and you're getting more disruptions coming in because people are asking you questions on where you are and what's happening. I can understand that would be a stressful scenario. So if you've encountered it before, perhaps consider doing a retro with them to see how how you can work together and pair up when you're resolving an incident. Yep. So the comment in chat is, yes, exactly. More work to manage them than work on the actual issue. Yeah. There's a way, I think, to navigate it. You may, if they're not on the incident team, you may have one person on your team solely responsible for communicating with them. I'm not sure how disruptive it is, but what you want to do is protect the incident management team so that they're laser focused on resolving what's kind of on their plate now, and they don't have to worry about responding to anyone else. Um, yeah, so taking the managing of the other team off their plate as best you can is, like, I think the key there. Okay, and we have a question in the Q&A. Any advice for those of us who aren't part of a project team but would like to provide internal comm support to the project team at large? Well, yeah, I think if you're on the project team, I think you'd have to have a degree of context into what's happening, but sometimes it's super helpful to have a member of the incident team not be on the project and handling communications. Um, Even in the scenario where our colleague just messaged in chat, having someone who is solely responsible for communications is really helpful. So you may touch base with either the project manager or the team lead on that project to let them know that you're available should an incident arise, and you can help coordinate the incident team and manage communications. All really good questions. I think we're just about at time. Um, Thanks everyone for joining me. Like I said, I'm happy to share out any templates or any advice that you need on managing this process. Please feel free to reach out. My email is crcraft@palantir.net anytime. I appreciate your time all. Thank you.